Hello?
Hey, PJ.
Yeah, what's up, Josh?
What's up, PJ? Welcome to the 1-800 BJJ Help podcast. Super happy to have you here. And first question, I wanted to check in. How was the Otter thing?
Oh man, we're starting there, huh? Yeah, I like otters, man. So yeah, when I told these guys last time we chatted that we couldn't do a podcast on Friday because I was going with my lady to like an otter experience where we get to like swim in a pool with them and hang out and stuff. And this is pretty sick. So I like otters a lot. They're cool, man. And it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. There was a fun fact you told us about otters that was pretty cool. Could you share that with the listeners?
Yeah, so these were actually Asian, like brackish water type of otters. They're smaller, but like sea otters, the big ones, they need stones to like break into things. And so they all have a favorite stone, and they have a stone pouch that's in their armpit here. And so they keep their stone for life a lot of times. But then if they really like another otter, they'll actually swap like stones with them, or they'll give another otter their stone. And so like they keep these stones. They love their stones, and they have a pouch for it. So I thought this was cool, but these otters didn't have stones.
In preparation for this podcast, I went around looking for a stone to bring, and I didn't find a stone. But just in like, since we're all eco people here,
The tism's going, man. The
yeah,
tism is going.
dude. After we were done talking, I literally watched otter videos for like an hour, and I was like, dude, I get it. These otters are freaking awesome. Um, but yeah, just because we're all eco people here, you said that they use the stones to break into shells so they can access their food, like mussels and things like that. They break into them.
Yeah.
So I didn't find a shell, but I found a deer antler, like a shed, and I was like, oh, this could you be used for the same function. Like
Okay.
it can achieve the same task. So it's kind of like the eco thing. There's different ways to achieve the same task. So I
Okay.
thought
Yeah. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
would be a good way to start the podcast because you could
Sick.
pry open the shells with the antler.
Yeah. What do you have? You have Atlas deer on Lanai, like a ton of them, right?
Axis deer, yeah.
Axis deer. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're
Sick.
super pretty. Mhm.
That's cool.
Dude, the
Hell yeah.
tism is like completely off the charts now. Like I don't think we've ever kicked off an episode like that before. But yeah, let's dive right in. Wanted to first cover the topic of a little bit about your history, but mainly a focus on certain eras and the biggest grappling influence and what you learned from each. So yeah, take it away. Where do you want to start?
Yeah. Okay. I don't, we could go like a little bit far back, but I think it's actually like quite interesting to like for maybe people to hear some ways of like I've went through things and learned, and it goes a little bit beyond jujitsu a little bit too. So I think like to start, I might give a little bit of background. I might go pretty far back. Okay. So I don't know if like Josh, I've seen you like do you go to Burning Man and do this kind of stuff,
I do,
right?
yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So you might be like a little bit up on like Eastern philosophy and religion and things like that a bit, right?
Hmm.
So I always thought about this when I started like learning CLA and stuff because so I grew up Catholic, and Catholic is like there's a lot of dogma in Catholic, and I think I lived through a lot of fear of dogma and making mistakes and doing things and following all these strict rules and guidelines and stuff. And um, I went through like a time in my life where I had to like it was a really tough time, and I studied in this time a lot of Eastern religion and philosophy and all these kinds of things, and it led me to like a new kind of awareness around a lot of things, and they focus a lot more on like direct experience over dogma in Buddhism, right? And so like Buddhism will it's also too like CLA. I think about Montessori learning. You guys know about Montessori learning and children and stuff like that? This is like something that like people do for their children, right? I don't know much about like child rearing or raising children or anything like that, but they set up like rooms and tasks and things like that for the kids to do everything on their own, basically, instead of instructing them what to do. Like they put their clothes out, they do all the stuff, and then the kids have to go dress themselves and do it all. And they learn through direct experience instead of like being like showed exactly what to do or having it done for them and stuff. And I felt like Buddhism was a little bit like this, where it was like there wasn't a lot of answers given in Buddhism. There's like there's texts and there's like sayings and there's meditation and there's all this kind of stuff, but they're not telling you like don't kill someone. or they don't like, don't cheat on your wife or whatever these different things are. Um, and so I think I never did well with rules. I think I had a lot of problems with rules, and there was a lot of stress around them. And I think in school, I learned a lot through like just trying things, seeing how things felt for me. And I think I had a good foundation. I had good parents that kind of gave me a good place to like evolve in, and do all this and make my own mistakes and stuff like that. Um, but, I think this directly correlated with how I learned later, because I think that, like, if I jumped into a room with John Danaher, this might be a little bit too regimented and strict for me. Um, and, it's part of why, like, I think I took to the CLA later and things like that in life, but also, like, pretty early on. So, like, if I think about times like when I started wrestling at a pretty young age. My dad was like kind of my first coach, and a lot of like what we did was games, and he loved to do the switch, for instance, in wrestling. This was like his favorite technique, and he would just like put us in a switch, or we would get in a switch together, and he would just say, "Whoever builds hip height wins here." Right? And so, like, we would just start going from that position and jumping over or sliding our hips out and doing all these different movements and, like, exploring the area for a long time, going back and forth to see who could build the hip height and get on top or start to win the position and things like that. And, like, I think that, like, when I think back to, like, what I did in, like, practice and then what I did in matches, it was that. It wasn't the thing that, like, sometimes it was things that I drilled too, but I also have drilled things for my entire life that I never did. Like my entire life, I can't tell you how many times I've done a certain technique 1,000 times and never done it once in practice and maybe it's because my awareness wasn't set to it or something like that along those lines. It doesn't mean it wouldn't work for me if I did it, but it just wasn't something that I did. Um, and so, we go through and obviously like wrestling had a bit of that, but it wasn't like very highly specific or directed very well. But there was a lot of like feel and intuition and little heuristics and guidelines to like certain games and stuff, uh, that I think were always really helpful for me growing up. And there wasn't a ton of instruction in my wrestling, anyways. I don't know if it wasn't as technical back then or whatever it is, but there wasn't a lot of instruction. It was a lot of like, start practicing a takedown, they start defending a little bit, this kind of stuff, right? You just feel it, you go. Um, and I wrestled a little bit in college. I got a good bit out of that. And then I did some MMA. And then I got move into like jujitsu and 10th Planet. And this was like that time where like and we're kind of talking about like influences, right? And now we're like kind of influences in jujitsu and my learning and kind of where I'm at today with all of that, right? And so obviously like 10th Planet influenced me a ton as far as like making me love jujitsu, I think, and getting the ball rolling with things and giving me a lot of opportunity and a lot of moves too. I think it worked well for me to drill something at the time and then have live classes because the fact of the matter was like for one, I was like pretty heavily focused and like very conscientious, if that makes sense. Like where if I had like a task to perform and I wanted to be good at something, which I really did, and I was hyper obsessive about something, like I typically am with like the things that I like, um, I could do that thing. So like we would, maybe drill something a little bit. Oh, there's Milo on the camera a little bit. Um, we would drill the move or whatever of the day, and then we would just do rounds. And for me, this like kind of actually worked a little bit because like I would only need to, like, touch the drill a few times or even just kinda see it and be like, "Okay, I get the movement, what's happening there." He's, like, kinda spinning under and grabbing the leg, like reverse Hiva or something, Kiss the Dragon, and then it's like, "Okay, cool," like and then I could go out and I had, like, a lot more grappling experience than a lot of these guys that I was, training with, so I could just, like, kinda do it on them while they resisted and stuff. And so kinda worked for me, but I don't think it was necessarily the drilling that put me there. I think that it was a lot of just, like, bringing awareness to certain things and, like and then practicing them in the live rounds a lot. And I don't think a lot of people did that often, like, they would be more, like, trying to survive or trying to win or trying to do stuff like that. But I'm pretty like obsessed with learning. You know, I always have been, for one reason or another. And This felt good for me. It felt like I was getting something out of these practices and stuff. But I always did feel like something was missing when I was taking jujitsu classes, because I felt like in wrestling we we didn't do like just rounds and then just drilling against nobody doing anything. There was a lot of like in between zone that wrestling had. Like there was so much in between. Like it felt like the bulk of practices were in between zones. Like there wasn't a ton of like just here's your matches or here's your rounds and here's your drilling. It felt like actually like most of the time covered was like this middle space that was done that like was completely missing from jiu-jitsu. Um, and I didn't really know how to solve that. The first time I really saw it a bit was with Eddie, actually. Eddie did a good bit of this. And I guess situations are a little bit of this too, for sure. But like Boogie's gym we didn't do a ton of situations. We did some for sure, but not a ton. Um, but Eddie actually did. Eddie ran a pretty cool practice. He would it wouldn't be drilling. He would do these warm ups, right? And I have to give credit where credit's due. Like I thought this was pretty awesome. He had the warm ups, which were like flows basically, and you didn't like he would just show it real quick. He would run through it. He'd expect you to know it, and then you just go through that movement real quick, and then you go through another movement, and then you go through another movement, and then like you get done those warm ups in like 15 minutes, and then he would play live games or situations from those positions that were in the warm ups that day, and then he would do rounds. And I was like, oh man, this feels like there's something to this. This is really good. I enjoyed that a lot actually. It felt like the first time I was like, oh, this is really cool. I would do it like probably around different techniques at the time. I remember thinking I was like, like probably like I wouldn't be spending a lot of my time in lockdown doing drills in lockdown and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But that's just my personal game and my like bias on the situation and on jujitsu and stuff. But like as far as the class structure went and stuff, I was like, this feels like a lot more of the middle ground being covered here. And but the difference was he wasn't thinking about outcomes, he was thinking about techniques that he wanted to emerge. That's like what I recognize now, is that like he would put us in whatever, like lockdown, and it was like do these three moves, pop guys, stop these three moves or whatever, you know what I mean? Just like go live from there basically. And I felt like in a lot of cases, like I could get away with a lot because again, like I had a lot of grappling experience and I felt really good there. And maybe they weren't as good as me. But like for most people, like they could get stuff pretty easy when they knew the exact techniques that the person was doing. And when I would take this home to try to do this with my guys, I would quickly feel like, okay, this isn't working. Like everybody's just shutting down that exact game that's right in front of them. And I can't quite replicate this how I'd like. And so it didn't feel right to me. There felt like there was some holes in all of this. But this was like, my 10 planet experience. I think it was really good. And I'm still, I mean, I talk like it wasn't, I'm not still a part of 10th planet, but basically what happened was like when I got gifted to running a gym, I was like I was only a couple of years into jujitsu, and I got asked to run this program, like a full gym and classes all day and all this kind of stuff. And that's when I had to like then figure everything out for myself. I wasn't anymore like training under anybody, so there was only a couple of years that I trained with 10th planet instructors. We still trained, but like I wasn't like a consistent thing and it wasn't in classes. I don't think I took many classes after those like 2 years, 3 years or so. Um, so then like this is gonna be like a whole different epoch of my life. And this is when like things get a little bit weird, right? I think I'm probably like 26 at this point or something. Um, I started like kind of doing MMA around like 23 or so, or a little bit earlier actually. And then I started doing jiu-jitsu around like 24, 25, and then I get this gym. Um, And so at this point, like my priorities all change a lot because I was gonna quit jujitsu before I got the gym. I mean, I wasn't gonna quit jujitsu. I was going to pursue a career. I needed to make money and stuff. I'm 25. This is like kind of bad at this point. It feels like, and these like $1,000 like things here and there. I gotta like put my computer in. Sorry. He's like winning a couple $1,000 every few months wasn't cutting it in these like EBI tournaments and stuff. And I didn't see much of like the future of jiu-jitsu at the time. Wasn't a big priority for me, but I love grappling, you know, and I love training and I love the camaraderie of it all. Um, but then like it kind of solved my issues when he asked me if I wanted to run a gym. I was like, well, I can make money doing this, I guess. Let's see how this goes. And so my focus shifts at this point into like learning how to run a gym, learning how to run a business, learning how to sell memberships, learning how to be a coach, learning techniques. You know, like I couldn't tell you how to do any techniques. And I also felt like I didn't want to teach the 10th planet system to its like maximum. You know, I felt like there was more out there in the world that I didn't quite know, you know. And I think that's like one of the things too that people don't understand is that Eddie has like a very traditional background. You know, he learned a lot of really good jujitsu for a long time from like John Jack Machado and stuff before he started just giving everybody chest to chest and underhooks and letting them and then lockdowning them. You know, like he learned that like it was good to win inside position first and like hand fight and frame and things like that. You know, he just decided to do something different. You know, because it was different and it worked. But so I felt like there was a lot I needed to learn, and there was a lot I needed to figure out. And at the same time, I also went through like, you know, this is when I tore my ACL. This is when I had like some like major mental breakdowns, like anxiety, depression was like through the roof. Things were crazy. Like I didn't know where I stood on anything. So this is kind of where like therapy, Eastern religion came in. I mean, it was 8 hours of Alan Watts a day some days. Yeah, like, I don't know. Do you know who Alan Watts is,
A
Josh?
little bit, yeah, I've heard a little bit. Every little bit that I hear is like just so profound and interesting though. So, wow, this sounds like a very pivotal, like the soil was like very fertile at this point. You can go in any direction type of time.
Yeah, it was tough, right? It was a strange time, but it was a big time for growth for me, you know, and it set me up for later because it took me out of competition. You know, I think I was doing really well leading into like running this gym. This is when I like kind of mm, was winning tournaments. I got into EBI like right around when I had my ADCC trials run the first time I ever did this, like 2019 or something like that. But I think I started the gym in like 2018 or something like that. So it was around this time ish, but it's a little bit blurry. But so anyways, this time is like yeah, like a lot of pain and fear and confusion that led to a lot of growth in the long term, you know. So I'm grateful for the time, but like I also miss like a pretty athletic peak period, you know, that like if I had been with just a team training and it was my full-time priority to be this athlete and do this thing, like I might have peaked a little bit sooner in when my body was still capable and things like that, right? Um, but we all have our journeys and the things that like lead us to where we are, you know. And I also don't know if I would have been the best student of all time either, you know, at one of these places in these camps. And I remember during this time too, like reading you know, so many books, but like the one that really helped me a lot, I think, feel better about where I was because I often felt like I was a little bit directionless, like I didn't have enough mentorship in a lot of areas, especially jujitsu. Um, was the Book of Five Rings. You guys know this book? Um, so I can't really pronounce his name.
Miyamoto Musashi.
Yeah, Miyamoto
Yeah.
Musashi. Yeah. He speaks in this book about like the difference between having like an instructor because he was like a Ronin, you know, he didn't have an instructor and he kind of had to build his own path and stuff. And he said that like it's the most challenging route and may take the longest, but it's also the most fruitful in the end of it, right? I mean, he had like I don't know the quotes or remember. I haven't read the book in 7 years, but like, it was something along these lines that like really like made me feel more assured with where I was. That like you know, time will tell and just keep doing the work. Um, and so I did, you know, and this was like more like my instructional period too, you know, like I think this is when I like right before Danaher dropped his, so it was like a lot of Marcelo Garcia in action, some Ryan Hall stuff, and then Danaher DVDs. But this was not helping my game a ton. It was a little bit, but it was helping my teaching and my understanding of jiu-jitsu, like theoretically and like from a like intellectual perspective, I guess. So I also like shifted why I did jiu-jitsu at this time. Because before that it was a lot of like feel and ego. It was a lot of like just a chip on my shoulder to show somebody that I was worth something in this world. And then it was hard for me after I went through all of this and I studied this religion for so long to compete at all, to be honest, because I didn't feel like, it was like, well, it doesn't really matter too much whether I win or lose. Everything's gonna be okay either way. I was like pretty stoic, man. Like I really was, I came out of this very stoic, and it was hard to get that same fire again. Um, and I've developed why I have the fire again and how I got it again, but it took a little while again. And it wasn't until I guess I could mention again too, like the shift in mindset that happened at this time, um, which took me from I told you I was always conscientious, right? And this time made me more aware and conscious, not only in my life but in jiu-jitsu. And so, like, I think that that was like the key component of what was maybe missing a little bit was the consciousness and awareness around things. Like you two, to me, seem like just naturally very conscious and aware. Maybe not naturally. I don't know. Maybe you guys worked at it, but like, uh, but me, everything was like very intuition, and like I just did a lot of trial and error. And if something felt right, I jumped into it. But if not, like, I wasn't having a ton of like, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like introspection about it all. Um, but during this time, I kind of developed that in my life and in my jujitsu and stuff. And then this gym gets sold. The guy I'm like working for, ownership in this gym, and I'm working 60 hours a week at this gym. I'm teaching classes all day. I'm barely training during this period too. Like I'm training a little bit with students, but I'm mostly like, teaching. This is like 3, 4 years of this basically. That's this period lasts. And then that gym gets sold, and then I'm fired the next day because they bring in a new coach to
Wow.
run the whole program and stuff. Um, and so it was such a blessing and a curse, man, because now I get to open my own gym and I get to do this and that. But I wasn't in a rush to open a gym. So at this point, like this is where I decided to prioritize jujitsu in my competitive career. Right, I'm around like 30 or so, and I'm like, well, I got like a half a decade left, maybe or something. Like, let's pour everything back into competition and let's like figure this out. And so I took the guys that wanted to follow me. I signed a lease somewhere, but I like my eventually, but my goal was like, let's keep some classes with these guys. Let's rent out some spaces and let me just keep my core group of people around me in the evenings. I'll focus all my mornings on the training. I'll focus my nighttime at like hashing out everything with like how I teach and what I think about jujitsu and with like this core group of people. We don't have to worry about money or anything like that. It's okay. And let's just build for the future here. And so this is when I got to travel around quite a bit and train with a lot of people, go to a lot of gyms, see how they ran their businesses, see how they ran their classes, get to meet some of the best minds in jiu-jitsu, um, and set myself up for when I'm going to open this gym in a few years. Um, and so I guess like this is probably a good time for me to like really dive into like different people that have affected me and like led me to where I'm at with different things. Um, so when I thought back about it, I thought about quite a few people, of course, and like I feel like we're obviously like an onion of people that are helping and taking care of it. We're also like an onion of like ripping the shreds off of like the things that you don't want anymore in your life or the things that aren't good, but you're also trying to pack on like so many layers in so many ways and stuff. And so many people have been so helpful in so many ways. Um, but there's a couple that stand out in some different ways. And I remember during that period when I was running that gym, for instance, I spent time with, or no, it was after with Cobrinha, and then a little bit around, I think it was after as well, that I was with Cobrinha and I spent time with Ryan Hall. These are both like pretty impactful to me. And the only reason I mentioned like mostly after that time period is because this is when I became aware, right? Like I think prior to this conscious like effort that I had, it was a lot of feel and like people probably had tons of influence on me, but like it wasn't registering the same way. So I don't mean to leave anybody out before that, but I wasn't paying as much attention. Um, but like for instance, I think with Ryan, this was the first time that I really felt someone being so intentional and workshopping things and spending so much time not only like intellectualizing, but like while you're on the mats feeling something too, and I got to really see how someone with such a like a wide depth of knowledge thought about it and practiced it. And he took like I took a lot out of training with him, and I used to call him like constantly. He would pick up my calls, man. He's a nice guy, mostly. He's a really good guy. He is. But, he would give me some great answers to things, man. Like, like, I'd call him and I'd be like, "Hey, there's this purple belt that came from England, and he's doing these, like 19 sequences from the guard into like this bare bow." And I'm like, "Dude, I can't do this, man. This is crazy." He's like, "Well, you don't have to." He's like, "You don't have to." He's like, "You need to like funnel your game into where you're good, and you can skip 100 steps. It's no gi jiu-jitsu and you can wrestle." You know what I mean? He made me feel so much better so many times. And he also introduced this idea of like creating black holes in your game too, to me, which will show up later, I guess, with when I went into like ADCC mode. But so Ryan had a big influence, and then Cobrinha was like probably the first guy in jiu-jitsu that I really felt like we were doing CLA with an outcome based response. So like I got pretty lucky because I went up there to train with him, and then he was like, "Hey, why don't you come back leading up to this match? Like yada yada yada. I'll help you out. We can train." So, I would drive 7 hours in a day pretty much to go up to Hollywood to go train with them. This was after the gym shut down, so I had the time to. And he would just put us in positions, like, let's say, like, headquarters, and he would say, "Let's." Actually, it wasn't even too much said. That was, like, kind of the difference, I suppose, too, but it was starting to, like it was like, "Can you get chest to chest? Can you get underhooks?" Things like that. And we would just start going, with like he would tell me where I needed to be and we would just start going. And then I'd start to like feel some things and he'd be like, "Well, what's in the way first?" And he'd be like, "Well, the knee's in the way." I would realize, you know what I mean? He's like, "Okay, well, why don't you try pushing it this way?" And I would try to push it that way. And then like it would go back and then I would feel what he was doing. We would switch because we would just do the same position for an hour and we would just switch top and bottom. And then I would like, okay, he's pushing the knee that way. Ah, okay. And then I'm overcorrecting, and then he's getting past the knee, and then my hands are there. What is he like? I'm getting past the knee, but now the hands are there. How is he like beating these? And this is the first time I saw the invisible jujitsu,
Mm.
because it was like there's so many moves, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, get chest to chest here, but it's like there's 100 ways to figure out how to get chest to chest right now. Like, how do you do that? It's like there's, it's a difference between like the gross motion and the simplicity of something when you drill it. It's like, okay, get to this position, but now get to this position when like this knee is continuing to be in the way and these hands are moving and you're getting tipped this way and that way. And, you have to maintain your balance and things like that. And so it was like stay in this position. Don't let me get my feet to the inside. So it's like holding the line, and then it was like get chest to chest. And like he kind of broke it down like this. And I learned a lot in that time, and I learned a lot about like patience and grappling. Um, in fact, like I think I quoted and changed the quotes of Cobrinha for like the next 2 years. I pretty much just like did his like couple of things that he told me, and I would just run with it. And it would be my entire seminar that I would teach. Like he used a cool example once where it was like jujitsu is like a conversation. And you don't always have to speak first in the conversation. Sometimes you let them speak first. And so like that was his idea when like so for instance, if I get to like side smash chest to chest and I threaded a knee through and weaved a knee in, um, I don't have to like try to jump to north south or knee cut right away or something like that. Like I can let them try to extend through that position until I fall into mount, right? Or something like that. And and the same could be said for like, okay, you put somebody in J point and it's like you could continue running north south or like continuing the pass, or you could just kind of hold that position until they try to overcorrect and then you use that to flank to the other side. And you're just having the conversation with them through your jujitsu, you know. And I ran with this analogy to my seminars of like constantly like it's a constant pitter patter of like your answer to my question. And then like took Ryan Hall's like black hole example of like just have be more adept at that conversation than the other person is, and then get them into that conversation with you. You know, it's like if you want to like beat someone, but you've had 1,000 more conversations from headquarters than that person, you know, you're gonna have all the answers to every question that they pose or every, like, response that they have while they're framing and doing things like that. So you just have to figure out how to funnel them into your black holes and then just know all the answers to the ways that they're gonna respond to you. And I just kind of hodgepodge those 2 together, and this changed my whole mindset towards, like, how I was approaching my training and my teaching and everything that I was doing. And so it coincides really well with when I, like, started training more for ADCC, when I decided, like, "Okay, I don't need a lot of the jujitsu that I know or that I do right now, and I just need to, like, at least for this first ADCC, like, stay safe on top, take people down, take the back if they turtle or heist when I get to my back." You know, that was it. And I just funneled everything into my black holes. That was it. You know what I mean? Like I made sure that there was foolproof plans for every position, more or less, where I could get into trouble and like basically did tried to do that. And that was what I did. Um, I got rid of a lot of the fluff and I just tried to create different black holes for different positions and just have a lot more like conversations in those areas leading into those ADCCs. And that process went through, and then obviously I did pretty well at ADCC. Um, and then obviously, like, you know, I could mention Justin Flores because he gave me a lot of the tactics along that time for my stand up and you know a lot of other influences. Of course, a girl named Rachel helped me a lot on the mats from Otter. She's amazing. So like as far as like structuring how I was training and getting to that point, I kind of had figured out a lot of that. And this is when I internalized everything instead of looked for it elsewhere as well. You know, but I think like prior to this, I felt like I always needed a mentor or a team or a coach. And I was like searching for this and going to different places and training everywhere, you know, and like, uh, and things didn't seem to like help me a lot sometimes. You know, they actually like sometimes I went backwards a little bit, you know, even though it was a great room, you know, like I go to maybe like Atos pretty consistently for a little while. And I would feel like, man, I got mentally tough, you know, like I got into good shape. I learned some good stuff too here and there, but like was it like funneling into what I needed for ADCC and to be the best there or something like that? Was it exactly what I needed as an athlete from that specific rule set and who I was? And the answer was probably, I mean, maybe it could have been, I don't know, but it wasn't at the time, you know, and me being able to start to create the conditions and situations in practice for myself to start having these outcomes and start building the grappler that I needed to be to do well at ADCC happened as a result of me changing my training around and internalizing myself and how I did everything. Um, it wasn't perfect, but like it did work, you know, it worked a lot. And I also had a like a good group with me at night that I could practice everything with. And I created like tons of uh situations that applied to ADCC, you know, and I was already doing like a lot of live situations. They weren't as clear as like CLA, but it was like, you know, starting in certain positions and saying, "Hey, can you get to here and get to your feet and face?" While like the other person is trying to like get the hooks in or pin them again or something like that. You know, just creating conditions, but just not as clear. And then when I did drill things or I did drill things with my students, I did a lot of like added resistance. So like when I showed something, um, it was like within 4 to 5 minutes of showing a technique that I was instantly like, "Okay, start upping the resistance," and I would call it keeping 'em honest. And so, you know, I would have them try it. I would give them some suggestions on what to do and, like, how to kinda counter and things like that, and we would just start adding and layering resistance in and stuff, and this was way more helpful than the dead drilling, you know? I think that, immediately I saw results from all of my students. Those guys that came with me, like, trained half as much as they used to, and they were mostly all casuals, and they're so good. These guys are so good, you know, for being kind of casual and having full-time jobs or whatever it is. And what they were with me for those 2 years, they got so good at jujitsu, very technical. Um, and it that wouldn't have worked as well maybe in it wasn't that scalable probably for like a full gym, but for the same guys in the same class setting, um, you know, 20 max in a class, it was very doable, right? But it wasn't that scalable for creating a whole program or a whole gym around it, things like that. Um, and so now enter like post ADCC, my first time, BJT, whatever, get a little more clout. I'm a little bit more of a person in the community and stuff. Um, and enter now like Greg, uh, even like Owen, Joseph, these guys were like massive influences. I took some time after ADCC. I had some hardships and stuff, and then I think like within 6 months or so, I was kind of back on the mats and training and stuff. And around the same time, I met Owen and Greg. Uh, Greg, well, I mean, I don't know if I probably told the story, but briefly, like when I opened the gym, I first opened the gym. A guy that I named Dave that was with me, he started teaching CLA, or you know, he did a promo for the gym, like a promo video before he started teaching. Like, hey, get a like instructor bio for the Instagram, and he goes on. He's like, yeah, we do constraints based learning here at 10th Planet South Bay, like yada yada yada, in my classes and this and that, and everybody, and like people are sending to me like, what is this? And I'm like, I don't know what the fuck, what is this guy doing at my gym? But, you know, like, Dave's cool, man. He learns a lot and studies a lot, and he's into weird stuff, and so, like, I just kinda trusted him a little bit on it, and, but then I wanted to help him out with his pursuit of this, and I have a little bit of clout, and so, like, you know, I don't know if we, like, ran into Greg first or I messaged Greg, but, like, at different times, I was like, "Hey, look, let me get us in contact with Greg. We can talk to Greg about all this stuff." And so, like, I did it mostly for Dave at first to get him, like, you know, connected and to learn more and stuff about it, and then I'm getting intrigued myself at this point, um, and, I do think that as well, like, very similar to, like, Ryan with the way he was very intentional and aware. Owen was the same way too. Like, I don't think Owen gets enough credit for how smart he is with jujitsu, you know, because he's a little rough around the edges and talks a lot of trash, and you know, he's young and um, you know, he has a certain persona that he's going for and that he is. But he is so sharp, you know, from the moment I met him, I'm like, "Man, I'm getting so much, like, how does he knows so much," and he's so aware too, like, you know, we'd get done around and he'd be telling me what I was doing to him and, like, how I was responding and then how it compares to how Joseph would respond when he was in that position and stuff like that, and I'm like, "Man, you picked up on a lot right there," you know, like, "You're seeing a lot of what's going on, this is crazy," and, and that was, like, really inspiring to me, and he's also, like, hot with the meta too, you know, so he really sees what's going on now and what people are doing and what's good, Um, and I mean, the same could be said for Joseph too. Once I met him a little bit later, he is quite an inspiration. I think nobody can really deny what Joseph can do and what he's doing and stuff. So, these last like 2 years or so, it's been a lot of focus on how to make CLA work for me, and for my students, and how I'd like to see it used. Uh, because I think Greg has a pretty copy and paste version of it that you could do as well. And I think he's a decade ahead of anybody on this stuff. You know what I mean? He's got way more. For the most part, like I can't say anything against what he does because I just don't know enough. You know what I mean? And like there's times where I question certain things about CLA and about the process and Greg's process with it, and maybe, some of the ideas that he has about drilling and certain stuff like that. But like I can't make a strong case for anything against it because I'm not nearly as researched as he is. I can only base things off of like my own experiences and how I learn and how I've seen my students learn and stuff like that. And I'm still in a lot of my own trial and error with it all too. But if you're interested, I can break down like maybe a class structure that's a bit different from CLA that I like sometimes.
Yeah, let's do it.
Um, so like I think sometimes for me, like obviously people need to. Did my headphones die? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, you're good.
Okay, okay. Um, and I can see all the arguments against this. I don't know, but for instance, I might want to like. mm, put people into a position that I want to work from, right? And I think that like in a class, we might like have a more heavy focus on like a module of what we're working. And then we obviously have to brush up on the other things through games and then do a little bit of like more like low or high variation kind of like rounds and stuff like that. But uh I've been like kind of liking some variation of putting people into a position or a thing and letting them go from there, whether they have experience there or not. And then watching the room and reading the room and seeing where I could do a fair bit of like what ChatGPT told me was guided discovery. Um, and so like I don't like going. The only issue I have so far is like I don't like going a lot, doing a bunch of live and then talking for 5-10 minutes. I think this really kills the energy of the room and the movement of the room. Um, so I'm trying to figure out how to like navigate all of that. But I do think that like when I'm able to give a bit of guided discovery or like bring a bit of like attention and awareness to certain things, or let them even feel it a little bit before they even jump back into the live, I see so much quicker, like people getting better at this a lot quicker, and I do understand that that's like there's prescription involved in that, and maybe it's not the best thing they could have figured out, but I do try to find the most broad ideas sometimes too, or like give them a lot of options to think about for the same movement that could be done, whether it's like a near side underhook or a crossface there or like, different things like that. But then like giving them a moment before they go live again to feel the particular mechanics and bring awareness to that situation. Just because like as much as like I don't drill and don't like drilling that much, I do think that when I'm able to slow the pace down on something and it not be live, and Greg might say that like you account for time to do that and stuff like that, and I understand all of that. But taking it out of a live context sometimes really allows you to see the mechanism behind something or the mechanic that feels correct for you, or having a bit of like help with that mechanic because you know I can't individually watch and like prescribe to everyone in the room what they're needing when they're at. Because I do think that like even Greg probably might not agree to this. I don't know, but like if he is seeing someone failing somewhere with a task or something happening, he will help to guide them in the right direction to get that done, with individual athletes for where they're at. You know what I mean? Like if he knows that DeAndre has like shorter, stronger legs and he can fit a shallow butterfly hook there, and that looks like a good thing for him, and he's capable of doing that at this like point in his career, then he's going to give some advice like maybe that shallow butterfly would be good there or something like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making that up, but um, it's hard to do that for an entire room. It's easy to do that for like an individual athlete, but when you have 30, 40 people in a class, like you have to like find the lowest hanging fruit with things that could be helpful to the room. Um, and so I think I've seen the greatest advancements when I do this. Again, there's still a lot of trial and error around it, and I only like to do that with the particular module that's the actual focus for that class, and then we go back into, like, okay, if that was, like, our work from, we're working on, like, some form of, like, ankle lock or something like that, ankle lock, aoki, whatever, or something like that, then, like, I'll give some advice there, and we'll spend a little bit of time on that, but then, like, when I go back to grounded, like, passing, standing, uh, upper body submissions, then it's just like straight constraints and it's like stay under the elbow, get to the submission, get your elbows back. You know what I mean? You're just like it's just clear direction, no like answers, no prescription, no anything really. And then I can go out and because they're just kind of cleaning up the game in these other areas and spending some time there and stuff. But I do think that this is really helpful. I do think that there's some like uh drilling that you can do that can help bring some awareness to certain things that like I still do on my own time. But again, it's like it's not like I'm going into a class to drill something that the instructor thinks I need or that is important for me or something like that. I'm drilling something that I'm directly like, and I'm not even drilling too much. I'm like literally just figured out where my knee needs to go when I do that particular movement. It's not like I'm like repeating something over and over again for like whatever, thinking that I'm building muscle memory around it or something like that. I'm just trying to feel what it feels like when my knee goes to the hip, and I'm trying to face it like at 45 right there because that feels like the best entry. But like, what kind of like, how do I do that? And then I'll ask for some responses to that and things like that. So you're just kind of workshopping and like tinkering in that area or something like that. But it is kind of drilling in a sense, right? Because it's not live work. Um, so still like hashing out all of that, but like this is where I feel best in my training. Um, and yeah, I feel like I spoke a lot. I'm sorry, man.
No,
Was
that's
this
the
was this bad?
No, that's actually the best feeling you get as like a quote unquote interviewer or whatever is to try to get out of the way as much as possible. There are some interviews that just like interviewers who talk a lot and like really the message coming out from you is the like main course of the podcast. So no, that was great. I do want to there's a couple directions I want to go. One is like into your coaching and your vision for the future, how you balance that with being a full-time competitor and your aspirations there. But I do want to go back real quick. You mentioned there was a point where you kinda lost that competitive fire. Maybe it was like you're listening to too much Alan Watts or something, and you didn't wanna compete too much anymore. But then at one point, you redeveloped that fire and found a new why. What got you back into competition?
Um, just the desire to have beautiful jujitsu. I think I stopped wanting to win so much, and I still want to win. I'm hyper competitive. It's never gonna go anywhere, really. Um, but like just the desire to gain knowledge and do the best form of this art and jujitsu that I can do, you know? And I think that like this is a great motivator because it can go across the board with competitors, hobbyists, just anyone that steps onto the mat. If we just try to create the best jujitsu that we possibly can, then we're doing what we need to be doing in here. Then we can make adjustments if you're a competitor or a hobbyist or whatever your goals are. But like this is what I'm trying to do in my gym now too, and what I'm trying to do with myself is just like create the best environment and conditions that I possibly can to make the best jujitsu I possibly can.
And it sounds like the most beautiful jujitsu or the best jujitsu is a deeply personal answer, and it looks different for everyone. That Ronin era seems really interesting of how you were able to direct your own training. Do you have any advice for people listening out there who want to take inspiration from more places and maybe they're mainly at one gym? How would they kind of model after some of what you did?
Yeah, it really depends on like what you're like capable of doing, right? Like I think like some people are blessed, more blessed than others, like or depends on how dedicated they are. Because I think the best thing you could do is like literally travel somewhere and spend some time somewhere, and get that hands-on experience because you don't know something until you feel it truly, or you experience it directly. And so it's really nice to like get yourself watching different people's Patreons and having intellectual conversations about jujitsu. This is all well and good and fun, but it doesn't mean much until you like put yourself in that situation. And so like if you know that there's a gym down the road from you that does some things like you have to do what's best for you. I think that like you can still like you have to do what's best for you. And at the end of the day, these are like services that these people are providing. If you're paying that gym for a membership, like you can probably like go somewhere else. If they're hooking you up and letting you train there for free and taking care of you and stuff like that, that's like a bigger conversation of loyalty and stuff that you probably need to like have with your own ethics and your coach and things like that. But like for the most part, if you're paying a membership somewhere and you know no one's going to be upset that like I mean they shouldn't be upset that you're trying to develop and see what else is out there and stuff. And I think like you should spend some time feeling some other situations out because it only makes everybody better too. Like when I have students that go to train at Atos and do comp rounds and stuff like that, I'm only thinking like how can I give them what they need here. I'm never upset about anything like that. This is like that's on me to provide them what they need for them to wanna stay here full time. And if I can't do that right now, I can't give them the bodies of purple and brown belts that are, like, high level people, like, nearly world champs and stuff like that, then they probably need some time over there doing that. And I have to let them do that, because they have to do what's best for them.
So what does today's phase or like chapter or era look like for you? You seem like you obviously have some competitive aspirations, but then some aspirations in the future of coaching as well. How do you balance all that these days?
Yeah, it's tough. I wish I didn't have so many interests or wanted to do so many things, you know? Um, it is tough because like, I wanna be a good business person, I wanna be a good coach, I wanna be a, like, intellectual instructor, I wanna be a good competitor and stay in good shape. I wanna be a good boyfriend and partner and, I wanna make money, I wanna, uh, live peacefully at the same time of all of this you know, and give up my worldly possessions as well, so it's a tricky balance between it all, right? But I think for me, like, what it looks like is a few more years of grinding, whatever if I have the fire and I'm getting better at jujitsu and I'm competing well, like, it would be dumb of me to quit, you know? But if I am, losing the fire, if I'm stalling everybody out and taking a bunch of steroids or, like, because this is what happens when people get older, right? Let's just be real about that. Then like, maybe it's time to like fall into my coaching phase a little bit more. And I'm not going to be probably as dynamic as I once was at 25 and stuff like that and move as quite as much, but like as long as I'm getting better, my jiu-jitsu is improving and I'm doing, what I would consider beautiful jiu-jitsu in these matches and stuff like that, then I'm not going to stop. So, I can foresee like a couple more years of that. Um, Tops. I don't wanna be in this forever, and it takes a lot out of you to be a competitor. It takes a lot. Um, you're very, like, it takes a lot, but I also love it, and I'm extracting so much out of this, and I'm loving it. But, I I I I wanna be a good businessman and coach, I think. This is, like, probably where I'm really starting to, like, start to move my eggs a little bit, and where I'm taking my experiences now and being a lot more aware so that I can start bringing it to my students now. And then by the time like I'm really starting to pivot, I'm going to be a much more complete coach and instructor and business person because like the business has to coincide directly with me being a coach too. Like I need to be able to like run a successful business to be able to afford to take time for these athletes and give them what they need as far as like anything, you know what I mean? I don't know how deep or how far that goes, but whether it's like creating housing situations for people, creating like you know, being able to help out in these different ways with sponsoring different athletes to help them, do what they need to do and get where they need to go. Having the free time to spend on competitors so that I have good people in the gym to run the business or run the other classes and things like that that aren't as competitive and stuff. And so like I have to kind of get adept in all those areas and I feel pretty good. I've been doing all right. I've been doing all right, despite having to like full time compete too. But I do think by the time I'm done competing, I should be in a pretty good place to like really build some guys up, man. I have some good guys already on the team, but we're 2 years in. We're just 2 years in.
That's amazing. What does your competition training and schedule look like these days, and how much control do you have over that?
Quite a bit, and even more than I did before. I think uh for whatever reason, some people have felt like it's valuable to train with me in San Diego. And so I am able to get a decent amount of good bodies in the room when I need to train, and they're with the program. They trust me, and so I've built out 3 days a week at my gym that I spend there, whether it's like doing CLA, workshopping things, but with good bodies around. Um, and then the other days I mix up at maybe Legion. I went to Atos last week and got some rounds. That was sick. Sometimes I'm even just jumping in the classes that like Dave runs at my gym and stuff on those other days and stuff to work on my strength and conditioning, doing some drilling and workshopping with like Rachel and some of my students and things like that in those free days. But like 3 days a week, my hardest days I spend at my gym currently. And then I'm probably training I probably take 1 full day off a week.
Gotcha. And then, Jake, I know you had a question that you were curious about in terms of the competition experience. So yeah, I wanted to see if you want to bring that up.
Yeah, when you were talking about, like, traveling and, like, just getting exposed to, like, some high level rooms and using that to, develop your jujitsu, this is kind of one thing that I feel like a bit of imposter syndrome around because, like, I watch a lot of jujitsu, I understand it a lot, like, intellectually, but I don't get to train with, like, anyone at, like, an even decent level. Um, so, yeah, I mean, you just seem like you've fought everyone, like, from, like, Levi to Mika to Andrew, like, any of the top level guys, you've fought them. So, like, I don't know if this is, like, a good question or if, like, it's just me kind of just, like, grasping at straws or whatever, but, like, I'm just kinda curious, like, what, like, type of feel do those, like, high level people have compared to, like, the people who train, like, 3 times a week kind of thing? Um, and, like, how do you potentially, like, recommend, um, like, training for, like, those types of athletes when you don't necessarily have that level of competition, you know?
It's hard to replicate, right? I
Yeah,
think um I do think that like you can do a lot on your own. And you might have to be a special person to do it too. Like you've seen Mikey do it a lot on his own. You've seen Joseph do it a lot on his own. Even myself, I've done a lot on my own as well by like, building up the people around you, giving them all the ways to beat you all the time in every position, to keep you like uh, always needing to one up your game and like this is very doable, but I do think that like like really humble yourself and see where you're at, you have to step into those rooms and experience that, you know. There's just like these like it's the same with like being great at anything, you know. It's so hard, you know. You might grow up in wherever, like Dayton, Ohio, and you're pretty good at the guitar and you want to be in a band and stuff, and you know, you might be the best guy in your town, and then you go to New York to try to make it. And like that's the time that will make and break you as a competitor. And like it might not matter to you, Jake, like if you wanted to just go for the experience to, you know, learn more. So because it might not be your goals to be competitive in that sense, you know, and you just might want to have that experience, and that's going to help you a ton with your what you're trying to do, build your database, you know, help the guys around you, you know, do whatever that you're doing. um but like if you really wanted to like make it, you can't let that break you, and you have to go in and do that more often. And you know, that guy from, I don't even know if Dayton is a place in Ohio, but you know, that guy's gonna have to stay in New York and get humbled for a long time and eat a lot of shit for a long time before he figures out if, you know, these people that are way better than him are gonna motivate him to be better, or if he's gonna break and go back to Dayton and just be a hometown hero and open up his music studio or whatever there, you know? And so that's a mentality thing, and that's a goal. It's based on your goals and it's based on your mentality, you know, and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds
But
like I need
but
to make a trip out to San Diego and get some training in with you. I'll bring my deer antler for you.
come, dude. Yeah, that'd be so sick. That'd be so sick, dude. I would love it. Dude, I wanted to grab Josh for the. I saw Josh in the class on Sunday, and I told my students to come, so they were there. So I trained with them, but and I was late too. But I was like, man, on the way there, I was thinking like, man, if I'm like my students are late or something, like I'm gonna try to grab Josh and go with him for the games. But we'll have to do one of those soon if you're down.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, the Andres classes on Sunday have been amazing.
So fun,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. But yeah, fast forward, if you were to fast forward a few years, let's say your competitive career wrapped up, what's your vision, or like what would be an amazing dream for your coaching and your team to look like?
Um, you don't want to hear like my true like vision for everything because it's so it's so outlandish. It's so outlandish.
No, no,
Because
we
like
want to hear it. We want to hear it. Let's put it out there.
okay. Um because it ventures on like it borders on like Bali cults and stuff, you know. Like it's there's like a church at my gym.
Sunday service.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding. But no, realistic like and realistic ideas that I have. I mean, my girlfriend's a great business person, and you know, a lot of people around me are, and you know, I'm getting pretty decent at things too and stuff. And you know, to be able to create something that is like, you know, a complex system um around jujitsu would be ideal. And so like just ideas like uh having a multi-use property with housing on it and small houses and things like that, and gyms and mats, and for like a space for a retreat is something that I think about like as well, or like camps and people to visit and stuff like that. Because how many people want to come and train in San Diego, and whether that's at like Atos and Legion or whatever, different spots like that too. Like so many people want to come to San Diego, but it's such an expensive trip, or you know, or they don't know enough people out here and things like that. But to create something like that with like a lot of housing and a community around it, and then even like being able to like, for one, like they can of course train with me, whether that gym is on that property or that gym is nearby or something like that, or working out deals for these people to train at Atos and Legion and things like that, and things like that, or wherever they want to they train when they're here and try things out. This is an idea that I have. I also want to create like a competitive team where you can count the people that are like on that team. You know, there's 25 people that are competitors at this team. That's something that Greg did. You know, like I've noticed that he knows the exact amount of people that are allowed in the room right there. And it's like, it's a lot different than going into a room at Atos or AOJ where like, I mean, don't get me wrong, like everybody's really good and stuff, but like that room's even the competitive room is like a pretty mixed room, like, and they have a lot more people than Greg in general too. There's 700 students at Atos or whatever, and Greg has 100 there. But like, it's very specific on who's allowed in the room and who they're partners with, and they have to like, if I create a competitive team, I would want them. If you want to hear another dumb idea I have, it's it's a collaborative effort team, but not based on a flag or a banner per se. And so like creating a room that has training 5 to 6 days a week, you don't ever have to commit yourself to like my name or my gym's name or anything like that. You only have to commit yourself to the time that you're going to spend there. And I don't know how that goes on with like whoever else you train or something like that. But like if you can rep whatever gym you want to, but if you can commit 3, 4 days a week to me in this room and the people that are a part of it, then you can be a part of that team. And I don't know if that's a dumb idea or not. I haven't thought it through too much. Um, but obviously, like, and obviously the people that are truly a part of the team would probably take priority in a lot of senses and things like that. But like these people would add to the room greatly to like raise all the ships and the boats of San Diego and of the room and things like that. And I don't care too much for my own like ego to be the guy that is like doing this or that. I just wanna do cool shit, you know what I mean? Like, I don't need to be that guy, uh, that is, like, the head of the whatever, like, I run this team and I am that guy and whatever else. Like, I just wanna create opportunities and do really cool stuff with cool people for as long as I possibly can. And it doesn't mean that I need to be that guy by any means. Um, Even if like, let's say Dave picks it up and he's like way better at coaching than I am in 100 different ways, like, dude, you run the room, man. You know what I mean? Even if I'm not training anymore, it's like at least now, like I still like have this thing that everybody can do and get so good, and like the ecosystem is just incredible. And I know that this is like way easier said than done, but I think about these kinds of things all the time, man. And I don't know how to implement them yet. And I have some ideas, and I know it's a slow play. I would never like jump into anything like this right away, or like buy a massive property, or like say I'm starting this team, everybody join or something like that. Like but it does like I would like to see things creep in this direction, and if opportunities present and this and that is available, like I want to make something special and really cool. And it doesn't have to be the biggest thing in the world either. It just has to be special and cool.
That's so cool. It sounds like a cult, but you don't need to be the cult leader in a sense. You just want like cool shit to be happening in an area and open everyone. And it sounds like this vision comes from a place of a lot of abundance. Like there's no scarcity and name and like owning and whatnot, but you just want a great environment that supports everybody who comes through. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool to hear. Anything else that you want to mention before we wrap up?
Um, no, man. I'm just grateful. Everything at this point is just extra credit for me. And like being able to talk to you guys. You guys are so cool, man. You guys are like some of my favorite types of people, like these guys that are just like you let me fucking excuse my language. You let me pontificate for like 40 minutes on my story, which is exactly what I didn't want to do either. But like you guys are so smart and kind and polite and like listened and really took it in and stuff like that. So I appreciate what you guys do, man. Um, Hopefully like there's something decent in this to pull from it for some people and stuff. But yeah, man, keep doing what you guys are doing, man. I'm a huge fan.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's been an honor. So fun. These are the best kind of interviews I think where we could just get out of the way and just let everything come through. So appreciate you coming on.
Sick. Thank you guys.
Thanks, PJ.